Good morning, members, and welcome to our briefing on COSLA's budget campaign for this year. I'm Katie Hagman and I'm the COSLA spokesperson for resources, and I'm joined by your presidential team, Councillor Shona Morrison, who is our president, and Councillor Stephen Heddle, who is our vice president. So COSLA is the voice of local government, and we're here to represent the views of you, the elected members. We want to give you an insight into our campaign this year. So the campaign was launched yesterday and continues throughout this week and next in advance of the Scottish Budget on the 15th of December, and it's designed to be an SOS call to save our services. As well as the news release, which you may have seen, which was widely reported in the local and national news, we have produced short, sharp campaign documents. And the documents aim to be a rallying call from local governments, telling communities everything they need to know about the impact of the Scottish Government's current spending plans on our council services and communities in the coming year. The campaign calls for the Government spending plans to be reconsidered and for this to be reflected in the forthcoming budgets. The news release and the campaign document outlines the precarious financial situation that councils across Scotland find themselves in during a particularly challenging period, as well as current pressures, and a key contributing factor is the real terms core budget cut of Scotland's 32 local councils over recent years. Overall, we estimate there'll be a total funding gap of around £1 billion for local government in 23-24 unless more cash is provided for councils. The main campaign document will be followed by a series of individual service-specific SOS calls, and all are scheduled to appear before the Deputy First Minister outlines the Scottish Budget on Thursday of next week. The document reflects the reality of what the Scottish Government sets out in its medium-term spending plans in May. Over the past month, I've had meetings with each of the opposition party finance leads at Holyrood to discuss the Government's finance ahead of our campaign and the budget. But I will pass over to our President, Councillor Shona Morrison, to say a few words now. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everybody. Whilst there are many areas where local and Scottish Government work together for our communities, there is no escaping the fact that money is extremely tight. All governments are having to cope with rising inflation and fuel costs. However, the Scottish Government spending plans as they stand will see council services either significantly reduced or stopped altogether. The same goes for staffing, with 70% of local government's budget is spent on staff, so it's inevitable that current spending plans will lead to job losses. The very serious impact of this scenario is that critical work that council staff do to support our communities through prevention and early intervention will reduce significantly. Last week, Councillor Heddle, Councillor Hagman and I, along with political group leaders in COSLA, met with the Deputy First Minister to express our significant concerns about the impact of the Scottish Government's current spending plans on local government and to ask him to reconsider ahead of next week's budget. Before we take any questions, I'll hand over to the Vice President, Councillor Stephen Heddle, to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks very much, President. I mean, there's no question that this is a very serious situation. The Scottish Government's flat cash spending plans looked difficult for us when they were announced in May. And today, with prices rising across the board, including energy costs, inflation around 10%, the local government's financial position is extremely concerning. I've been a councillor for since 2007. This will be the 16th budget I've participated in, and I've never seen it so tough. And make no mistake, what we now face as councillors struggling to deliver even the basic essential services that our communities rely on. To put in perspective, the estimated £1 billion funding gap for councils in 23-24 is equivalent of the entire budget for early learning and childcare across Scotland, or 17,500 teachers. And a funding gap of this magnitude will have an impact on all our communities, with the most vulnerable, the people who rely on these services the most, suffering the worst consequences and widening the inequalities that we're trying to bridge. this is what our campaign on your behalf is aiming to highlight to people across Scotland, to try and change the thinking and improve the budget position for local government. But I'll hand back to Katie before we move on to the questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks both. So in conclusion, as you've heard, we're at crisis point like never before. The impact of the Scottish Government's current spending plans for communities is serious and they must be reconsidered. The financial impacts for other parts of the public sector are also serious. When councils can't spend upstream, for example, on preventing ill health, services like the NHS will end up spending more money when issues become serious. Directors of Finance across Scotland's councils are sufficiently concerned about the financial sustainability of councils that they have written directly to the Deputy First Minister outlining their concerns. This really is an SOS call from Scotland's councils, and people in communities across Scotland will be pulled into further poverty and uncertainty if there's not adequate funding for the vital services that support them. Just want to say thank you everyone for coming along this morning. Thank you for listening, and we thought it would be really worthwhile for us to have this session to give you the opportunity to have any questions raised. We've also got Sarah Waters, who is our Membership and Resources Director. She's also on the call, and when you look on your screen, you've got a Q&A tab, so we'd really welcome any questions that anyone has to just pop them in the question and answer tab. But really appreciate your time and thank you for coming along this morning. Just have a look on there. I don't think there's the ability to unmute microphones. But I'm not the tech person on that one, so. Hopefully everybody has also had a chance to have a look at our full document, because you know the figures in there are quite stark. So I think the chat function is off, but there is the Q&A tab that should be open at the top there if anybody is wanting to put in a question. Appreciate it. It's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning.
And if people are like me, they'll be slow typers. I'm a one finger typer.
Hi folks, it's Douglas here. We have no questions being asked. However, if anybody does want to speak, they can post within the Q&A as well if they'd like to speak and be brought into the meeting. And I can just unmute their microphones. I don't know what the equivalent is for unmuting cameras, but turn the cameras on equally.
Yeah, no, I think really welcome if anybody does want to say a few comments. We've not got huge numbers this morning, so give it a few moments, and then if not, we'll draw it to a close. But just again, really appreciate the opportunity to present to yourselves as councillors. Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to say this is the first one of these that we've run, so it's obviously a learning experience for us too, in terms of how we publicise it. But I was just wondering, I see there's a question coming through, so I don't interrupt Julie here, but I was going to suggest that we could maybe speak about the subsidiary lobbying documents that's going out as well, around education and social care. If Heather would want to say something like that. But Julie's got a question.
Yep, I don't know. Douglas, can you unmute Julie and see if she wants to just ask it direct?
It's in the Q&A.
Yep, okay. So I've got a question here. So how are councils extending the reach of income generation ideas? what's coming up that hasn't been tried before? So certainly that is a question that has been raised quite a lot, certainly with myself as the resources spokesperson. For those of you who maybe aren't aware of the structures within COSLA, I don't chair a thematic board unlike the other spokespeople. So I report direct to leaders, and the question has been raised as to how can we look to explore income generation. Obviously, with not having a thematic board, it doesn't create that space to generate discussion. But I will pass over to Sarah, because I know that it is a point that's been raised many times. So Sarah, can you come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bell. And I know that certainly within the Directors of Finance network, they are all having discussions about possibilities. I guess the balance this year is how to balance, generating income, which would clearly come from residents and visitors, with the cost of living crisis, which I think is a really challenging one for councils. We are in active discussions now with Scottish Government on the local visitor levy, so that is progressing with the intention to lay the legislation for that in the springtime. Obviously, that will not suit all local areas, but I think what it does is it gives an option if it is something they want to consider. But as I say, I do know that there are, I think, and you will be aware from your own council, that income generation is something that a lot of councils are really keen to explore. And I think what we're trying to push Scottish Government for is actually enabling legislation as opposed to individual pieces of legislation, for example, around parking or around tourism, but actually a legislation that would say to local areas, if there's something you want to explore, you have the legislative basis on which to do that if it suits your local area and you have local priorities that you want to spend the money on.
Thanks, Sarah. I hope that answers in part your question, Julie, on theirs. It is a really, it's a wide-ranging subject, and certainly one of the points that certainly all of us on the call here have been speaking with the Scottish Government on is about that level of trust and about building partnership working and actually trusting local authorities, trusting our councils to actually deliver for each and individual local authority, because we're a wide-ranging bunch, and not every local authority is going to be the same. And what works in one is not necessarily going to be appropriate in another. But thanks for the question. I don't see anybody else wishing to come in, although let me have just a quick check. No more questions. There we are. So if there's nothing else, Sarah, do you want to come back in? Yeah. Yeah,
I just posted in the chat just saying I could outline the timetable for next week if that would be helpful. So I think we will be in discussions with the local government finance team within Scottish Government actively every day, probably next week, with a view to having Councillor Hagman having a call, hopefully Wednesday evening or Thursday morning of next week. The budget will then be published at around about 2 p.m. next Thursday. But very shortly before that, hopefully even a couple of hours before that, we will get a series of spreadsheets from government colleagues that we will share with all directors of finance across Scotland, so that they can check things from their perspective. And we go in then, once the budget's announced, we go in then to a settlement checking period, and it's good that we're going to be able to do that before Christmas. I think there had been talk of the budget potentially being delayed to the 22nd of December, so that would not have been pleasant for your finance colleagues. But what we'll do over the 15th, 16th, and then the Monday and Tuesday following is make sure that everything is checked across all the tables, so that there, any kind of errors can be flushed out, any inconsistencies of treatment of indicators, etc. So really by about the 18th or 19th, 20th, we'll be sure that that's the settlement as it stands. We'll then after Christmas go into the budget bill process, with a view to then finalising the settlement in February. So COSLA will continue to lobby during that period, so there'll be an active the Budget SOS campaign will continue through that period. And actually, sorry, I should have said on the evening of the budget, we will put out what we normally do, which is our budget reality document, which basically just sets out the facts in terms of the movements, in terms of the cash settlement. So that'll let all elected members across Scotland see what the settlement means in cash terms. So we don't do any kind of real terms analysis. We just simply present the facts in cash terms. And then COSLA leaders will meet the day after that to form their opinion on the budget. And obviously, Councillors Morrison, Heddle and Hagman will be there to represent COSLA in those discussions.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think it is also really important to stress that COSLA has been reaching out across the political spectrum. As I said earlier, I've been meeting with opposition MSPs, and I will continue to have those dialogues going forward as we go through the budget process. And certainly just to offer some reassurance to all councillors on the call here, everybody that I've spoken to as resources spokesperson, everybody is understanding the plight of local authorities, and they want to assist us in the best way possible in the financial situation that we are. So we will continue to have those discussions and dialogues. So yeah, I think it's really important that we do share the information as much as possible and share it with our colleagues who maybe weren't on the call today and who couldn't make it. So what I would also, I think there's another, can we contact COSLA if we have budget questions? Absolutely. I think if we just pop the email address in the chat, it'll either go to, well, it'll go to somebody within the team. So maybe perhaps Douglas can put in an email address there. But yeah, absolutely. Any specific questions following the call today? So maybe just invite Shona and Stephen if there's any further points. Stephen, do you want to come in and then Shona?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Yeah, I suppose it's just to kind of reassure members that we've been pushing hard on the whole lobbying. We've been making the point that local government has been suffering for 10 years, while perhaps other parts of the public sector have been suffering less. We know that the launch of our campaign was well received by the media, but that the Scottish Government pushed back, saying that the local government since 2013 had a budget increase of, I think it was 22%. But I think the counter fact to that is that the Scottish Government's budget itself has gone up by 49%. So it's, I guess we need to kind of get this message out there as well, just to kind of push back against the pushback. But certainly we're pushing very hard on the kind of financial issues. We're pushing very hard on the need for the Scottish Government to acknowledge that we can't deliver everything that they want us to do with the money that they're giving us, and some reality needs to be associated with that. And for the need for a good trusting relationship to help square that circle going forward. So that's been kind of the three legs of our lobbying stool thus far. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Katie. Nothing else to add, really, just to say thank you for those who've attended this morning. I think it's a really good medium to have these discussions, and hopefully it's something we can repeat. And I know that it's recorded, so it'll go out to members. There was quite a short window, I think, of advertising the session. So that's something that we can have a little think about, and how we ensure that people are getting links and can join. But I think it's, like I say, it's a good area for us to have those discussions, and for COSLA to be working on behalf of its members. So thank you, everybody.